Erev Tov Rabotai, we are continuing with our Mishna Yomi, Masechet Gittin. We are up to Perek Zayin, Mishnah Gimel. Today's Mishnayot should be Le'elui Nishmat, Neria ben Svetlana Ranbayev, Eliyahu ben Burchai Israelov, Chana bat Miriam, Sason ben Raya, Yoshua ben Shifra, Menuchatam began Eden, Amen, and Avdil ben Chaim lechaim, v'derefuah shelemav, Daniel Shalom ben Rosa, B'toch Shah Chulei Israel. The Mishnah discusses various cases in which a husband gives a get on the condition that he dies. The reason he does so is because he is childless, and therefore when he dies, his wife will be subject to the obligations of Yibum or Chalitza with his brother. To prevent this, he gives her a get and stipulates that it should take effect if he dies. The Mishnah teaches how the condition must be structured in order for the get to take effect and exempt her from Yibum. It begins by listing the ways in which it does not take effect. Ze gitech im mati. If a healthy man gave a get to his wife and said, "This is your get if I die," and he then died, that is, he divorced her on the condition that he will die before her, and he in fact died first. Ze gitech im mati mecholize, or a sick husband gave a get and said, "This is your get if I die from this illness," and he died from that illness. Ze gitech lachal mitar, the husband said when giving the get, "This is your get after I die," and he then died, lo amar klum. The law in all these cases is that he has not said anything, and the get does not take effect. This is because the get in these cases was meant to take effect only after he died. Where the husband said, "This is your get after I die," it is obvious that he means to delay the divorce until after he dies. However, even in the cases where he did not say "after I die," but "if I die," as in the first two examples of the Mishnah, he also means to push off the divorce until after he dies. This is because when a person makes a transaction based on a condition phrased with the word "if," he means that the transaction should take effect only after the condition is fulfilled. Once the husband dies, however, the marriage is over and it is no longer possible to divorce. The Mishnah now lists the ways in which a get is valid, even though it is given on the condition that the husband dies. Me'ayom im mati, if the husband gave a get and said, "This is your get from today if I die." Me'achshav im mati, or if he said, "This is your get from now if I die," the get is valid, because in these cases the husband did not delay the get until after he dies. Rather, he made the get effective immediately if he ends up dying later on. Therefore, the divorce is valid and she is not subject to the obligation of Yibum. In the next case, it is unclear if the get takes effect right away or only after he dies. Me'ayom ulachar mita. If the husband said when he gave the get, "This is your get from today and after I die," and he then died, get veno get, it is a get and not a get. That is, it is not clear whether it is a valid get. It could be that since he started with the words "from today," he means for the divorce to take effect right away, and when he then said "after I die," he only meant to make it conditional on his dying afterward. The get would then be valid since it was meant to take effect when he was alive. On the other hand, it could be that he originally wanted the divorce to take effect from today, but he then changed his mind and decided to delay the get until after his death, and therefore added "after I die." If that happened, the get would not be valid since it was meant to take effect only after he died. Therefore, im met choletzet, if he dies without children, his wife must perform chalitza with his brother before being allowed to marry someone else. V'lo mitabemet, but she may not marry him in Yibum because she might be divorced and therefore forbidden to marry her husband's brother. A woman is normally forbidden to marry her husband's brother, as it says in Vayikra chapter 20, verse 21. The Torah makes an exception for the mitzvah of Yibum. In our case, however, there is a question whether there is a mitzvah of Yibum, since she might have been divorced before he died. Therefore, she may not marry him because of the doubt. On the other hand, she must perform chalitza with him because it is possible that the get was not valid and she was still married to her husband when he died. The Mishnah discusses another case where a man gave a get on the condition that he dies. Ze gitech me'ayom im mati mecholize. If a man who was sick gave a get to his wife and said, "This is your get from today if I die from this illness," v'amad v'alach bashuk, and he then recovered and walked around in the marketplace, v'chalav v'med, and after that he became ill again and died. The law is as follows. Omdinoto, we make an assessment of the cause of his death. If he died because of his original illness, get, and the get is valid even though he seemed to recover for a while because the husband's condition was fulfilled. That is, if we determine that even though he recovered temporarily, it was the original sickness that caused him to get sick again and die, then he is considered to have died because of the original sickness and the get took effect. V'im lav, but if he did not die because of the original illness and no get, then the get is not valid since the condition was not met. That is, if the original sickness is not what caused him to get sick again, rather after recovering from his first illness, he became sick with a new illness and died from it, the get is not valid. And that is in the Mishnah Gimel. Now, we learned in this Mishnah that if a husband says, this is your get from today if I die, and he died, the couple is considered divorced from the time that the get was given. Mishnah Dal now discusses the law that applies to this couple between the time the get is given and the time he dies. If a man gave a get and made it effective today, on condition that he dies, his wife may not be alone with him afterward, except in the presence of witnesses. This is to ensure that they do not have marital relations together. If they were to have relations, we would suspect that they intended to remarry each other through this action, because one of the ways to betroth the woman to do Kiddushin is by having marital relations with her with intent to betroth her, as it says in Kiddushin chapter 1, Mishnah 1. Since it may turn out that this couple is already divorced, making them forbidden to be intimate with each other, we suspect that they may have had in mind to remarry each other by having marital relations together rather than sinning by having relations without being married. And the new get would be needed to end this new marriage. In order to prevent this from happening, the rabbis decree that they should not be alone together. Although the Mishnah uses the term witnesses, plural, it is enough for them to be together in the presence of a single witness, since this will prevent them from being intimate with each other while that person is present. Afilu Eved, this witness may even be a male Canaanite slave, Afilu Shivcha, or even a female Canaanite slave, because people do not engage in marital relations in front of another person, even if the person is of a lower status. Chutz mishivchata, an exception to this rule is the wife's own female slave, mipnei sheri bah gas bah b'shivchata, because she feels very comfortable with her female slave and might not be embarrassed to have relations in front of her. Therefore, the couple may not be together if the only one present is her own female slave. The Mishnah now deals with the case where the husband says, this is your get from the time that I am still alive if I die. In such a case, the divorce does not take effect when the get is given, but at the last moment of the husband's life. Here too, the Mishnah discusses the law that applies to them from when the get is given until the husband dies. Mahi be'otana yamim. If the husband made the get effective from the last moment of his life, what is the woman's status during the days between the time the get is given and the moment before he dies? Is she considered married or divorced? Rabbi Yehuda says, Ke'eshet ish l'chol devareha. She is considered a married woman with regard to all matters, since the get does not take effect until just before the husband dies. Therefore, if she cohabits with another man during this time, they are guilty of adultery. Since we now know that her husband did not die until long after she sinned with this man, it is clear that she was still a married woman at the time they sinned. They therefore have committed adultery. If they did so deliberately, they are subject to execution, as says in Sanhedrin chapter 11, Mishnah 1. If they did so mistakenly, they must each bring a chatat, a sin offering, as it speaks about in Horayot, chapter 2, Mishnah 6. The next Tana, however, disagrees. Rabbi Yossi Omer, but Rabbi Yossi says, Megureshet ve'enah megureshet. During this time period, she is divorced and not divorced, meaning it is unclear if she is divorced or not. This is because at any given moment it is possible that the husband will die a moment from now. This will make the get effective now, the moment before his death. So if she cohabits with another man, they are guilty only of possible adultery, not definite adultery, since it is not definite at the moment they sin that she is really a married woman. Although when the moment passes and he does not die, it becomes clear that she was married at the time they sinned, Rabbi Yossi maintains that this does not change the legal status of the previous moment. A person's status at any given time is based only on what can be known at that time. The future cannot retroactively determine the legal status of the past. This is the principle known as em berera. There is no retroactive determination, meaning a future event cannot be used to determine definitely the legal status of something in the present. Since at any given moment there is no way of knowing what will happen to her, what will happen later, her status in the present always remains one of doubt. Therefore, if they sin deliberately, they cannot be executed, since their status at the time of sin had not yet changed, and it is therefore not clear they did anything that is punishable by death. And if they sin unintentionally, they do not bring a chatat, a sin offering, but an asham talui instead, a possible doubtful guilt. The offering brought by someone who is unsure whether he committed a sin for which he needs to bring a chatat, as it speaks about in Vayikra, chapter 5, verses 17 through 19. Rabbi Yehuda, on the other hand, does allow her status to be retroactively determined based on future events. He holds yesh berera. Therefore, if the husband does not die until sometime later, she is considered fully married until a moment before his death. Now, the dispute between Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda applies only to conditions that are not within a person's power to fulfill necessarily. However, a condition that a person makes that is up to him or her to fulfill, and it is within his or her power to fulfill, can determine the validity of the get retroactively, as we will see in the rest of this chapter, B'ezrat Hashem, Bli Neder. And that is the Rabotai of today's Mishna Yomi. Baruch Adonai Leolam. Amen v'amen.